Welcome to this edition of the ASSI Video Journal Club. Today I am going to discuss two famous papers on adolescent idiopathic scoliosis. The 1983 publication by King and the 2001 publication by the Lenke's group. These papers form the basis of our understanding of this common spinal deformity. The selection of fusion levels for AIS was an area of controversy leading up to this paper. There were many propositions, however, most conceded that the fusion area in the thoracic pattern curve must include all the vertebra within the measured curve. But more detailed study covering different types of curve patterns was lacking. Dr. John Moe, who Dr. Harrington called the father of modern scoliosis surgery, had developed treatment guidelines for treating AIS patients. His fellow, Howard King, was given the project of retrospectively reviewing all the cases treated at the Twin Cities Scoliosis Center using Moe's guidelines. For 25 years, John Moe taught the principle that the mobile lumbar spine is better than a stiff and a straighter one. And in accordance to this philosophy, in patients with combined thoracic and lumbar curves, in whom correction of the lumbar curve was greater than the thoracic curve on side bending, he had advocated selective thoracic fusion of only the upper curve. These guidelines were being followed by the Twin Cities group for 25 years. So the purpose of this paper was to review the experience of the Twin Cities Scoliosis group and study the effect of the selective thoracic fusion in combined thoracic and lumbar curves. Second was to find a reliable method of identifying patients suitable for this method, and finally recommend precise fusion levels. Please note that the authors did not mean to write this paper to propose a classification for AIS, but this ended up being one of the most famous classification systems used for over 2 decades. So coming to the material and methods of this paper, this was a retrospective review of a 30-year study period which excluded single lumbar and thoracolumbar curves but included all adolescent curves. The age group was 10 to 25 years at the time of surgery. All were treated with a posterior spinal fusion with Harrington instrumentation, and the minimum follow-up was for 2 years. They had 405 patients in the patient cohort with an average follow-up of 4 years. The paper described the central sacral line as a line that is perpendicular to the intercrestal line. However, this works only if the pelvis is horizontal. As we shall see later, we now draw the CSVL from the middle of the sacrum parallel to the edge of the radiograph. The vertebra that was most closely bisected by this line was defined as the stable vertebra. The curvature measurements were done on standing, AP and lateral views and supine side bending films. The percentage flexibility of the thoracic and lumbar curve was calculated. The percentage was calculated by subtracting the bending curve from the standing curve divided by the standing curve multiplied by 100, and a flexibility index was calculated by subtracting the thoracic from the lumbar flexibility. So if the lumbar flexibility was larger than the thoracic flexibility, then the flexibility index was a positive number, and if the lumbar curve was stiffer than the thoracic curve, then the flexibility index was a negative number. The curve types essentially were two: the double curves, the S-shaped curves, and the single curves, the C-shaped curves. And the authors, when they defined them, they said that combined thoracic and lumbar curves were S-shaped curves in which both curves crossed the midline drawn vertically from the middle of the sacrum. And this kind of a vague definition of the double curve created a lot of controversy later, as we shall see. They did not clearly define what it means to cross the midline. So the type 1 curve was also called as a true double major curve, is a S-shaped curve where both curves cross the midline, on the standing X-ray, the lumbar is larger than the thoracic curve, but the lumbar is also less flexible than the thoracic, which makes the flexibility index as negative. If you see this example from the paper, you can see the confusion because here the thoracic curve is not crossing the midline, and many in the current Lenke classification might call this a Lenke 5C or a 6C rather than a 3C or something like that, or a double major curve. So with this example itself, you can see when they did not clearly define what it means to cross the midline, it created some bit of controversy. The type 2 curves was a false double major curve where both curves again cross the midline. On standing, the thoracic curve is larger or equal to the lumbar curve, but here the lumbar curve is far more flexible than the thoracic, making the flexibility index as positive. Then there were single curve types where the lumbar curve does not cross the midline. The most common pattern was the type 3, which is equivalent to the Lenke 1A curve that we now know. And these curves had two different variants. The first variant was the long thoracic type where the L5 is centered over the pelvis, but the L4 is tilted into the long thoracic curve, that means to the right side for a typical right-sided AIS patient. The main difference between the type 3 and the type 4 was the length of the thoracic curve and the pattern of the lumbar compensatory curve, where the lower part of the curve goes well into the lumbar spine. The other variant was the type 5 curve, in which the T1 was tilted into the convexity of the main thoracic curve, also called as a positive T1 tilt. Here, the left-sided rib was higher. So the results, the most common patterns were the type 1 and type 2 curves. We'll see individually. For the type 1 curves, they were about 13%, 52 patients in total. So this is the true double major. For 49 patients, the lumbar curve was larger than the thoracic. Flexibility index was negative, meaning that the lumbar curve is stiffer. Non-selective fusion was done. For two curves, the thoracic was larger than the lumbar, but the flexibility index was negative, which means the lumbar is stiffer, and again non-selective fusion was done. And only one patient, the lumbar was larger than the thoracic, but not by very much, by only 3 degrees, well within the measurement error. But just because the flexibility index was positive, which means the lumbar was far more flexible than the thoracic, a selective thoracic fusion was done. And the results were good for this group. There was no progression because the LIV was the stable vertebra. In the Harrington era, for stable vertebra for non-selective fusion tended to be L3 or L4. So there was no scope of progression because almost the entire spine down to L3 or L4 was getting fused. For the type 2 curves, which accounted for 1/3 of the whole cohort, 132 patients were there in this group, out of which 21 patients had a non-selective fusion. None of these patients had any progression of the deformity. 111 patients had a selective thoracic fusion, and this was the interesting group. So we'll see it in more detail. This group was divided into 4 subgroups depending on where the LIV ended with respect to the stable vertebra and the neutral vertebra. So in one of the subgroups, in 41 patients, the LIV was the stable vertebra and the neutral vertebra. The fusion stopped at that level and there was no progression of this selective thoracic fusion. In 27 patients, the LIV was the stable vertebra and the LIV went beyond the neutral vertebra, and still in this group of patients there was no progression. In one patient, the LIV was the stable vertebra but stopped short of the neutral vertebra, which was a little bit distal to the stable vertebra. Again, there was no progression. But the interesting group is this: in 42 patients, the LIV went beyond the stable vertebra and the neutral vertebra, and the LIV was practically into the lumbar curve. And in this group of patients, about 57% of 42, which is 24 patients, had a progression of the lumbar curve, and 2 required extension of the fusion as a revision surgery. So in retrospect, if you see in this group, the 21 patients who had a non-selective thoracic fusion could have been treated by a selective thoracic fusion in this category. So the lesson learned from this is that it is possible to do a selective thoracic fusion for type 2 curves where the thoracic is larger than the lumbar and the lumbar is more flexible than the thoracic, uh, and it gives stable results without any progression on a spontaneous correction of the lumbar curve without it being progressing at a long-term follow-up, as long as you keep the LIV as the stable vertebra. For the type 3 curve pattern, which is the main thoracic curve pattern or the Lenke 1A in this equivalent Lenke classification, there were 33% patients here, 133 patients divided into these 5 subgroups. 32 patients, the LIV was the stable vertebra and the neutral vertebra. There was no progression. 34 patients had the LIV as the stable vertebra and a little bit beyond the neutral vertebra. Again, no progression. 63% of patients had an LIV that stopped short of the stable vertebra, but the LIV was the neutral vertebra. In this, 66% of patients had a distal add-on, but there was no resurgery in this group. 3 patients, the LIV stopped short of the stable vertebra as well as the neutral vertebra. One patient had a distal add-on, but again no revision. One patient had an LIV that went beyond the stable vertebra and the neutral vertebra. A very mild decompensation in this patient, no revision surgery. So if you see overall, the big picture here is that if your LIV is the stable vertebra using Harrington instrumentation in this group, you had no distal add-on. The type 4 was the long thoracic type where the L4 was tilted to the right side. In the 37 patients in this group, they were divided into 5 subgroups. 7 patients had an LIV which was the stable vertebra and which went beyond the neutral vertebra and they had no progression. 8 patients had an LIV same as the stable vertebra and the neutral vertebra and they had no progression. One patient had a LIV as the stable vertebra, the neutral vertebra was beyond it. Again, this patient also did not have any progression. But 18 patients had an LIV that stopped short of the stable vertebra. The LIV was selected to be the neutral vertebra, and in this patient, 50% of patients had an add-on. One patient had a revision, and that patient was a 12-year-old immature child which was fused 2 levels short of the stable vertebra. And 3 patients had an LIV that stopped short of the stable and neutral vertebra and had no progression. So looking at this overall results for type 4, you see that if you stop well short of the stable vertebra in these curves, you are going to have a significant percentage of patients having a progression or a distal add-on phenomenon. So the recommendation, this was the first classification or the first paper that brought attention to this special type of curve pattern where the fusion typically had to go down distally into the lumbar spine. For the type 5, which was a double thoracic type where you have a structural proximal thoracic curve, if you stopped at the stable vertebra, you had no distal add-on. But if you stop short of the stable vertebra, then 7 patients out of the 10 had a distal add-on and 1 had a revision surgery. So overall, if you see 217 patients from type 3, type 4 and type 5 where the LIV was fused to the neutral vertebra and stopped short of the stable vertebra, 62% of patients had a distal add-on. So fusing short of the stable vertebra was a problem using this instrumentation, and 2 patients had kind of a revision surgery. So coming to the UIV for the type 5, 47 patients, 41 patients had both curves fused, proximal thoracic and main thoracic, with only one minor shoulder imbalance which did not require surgery. But 6 patients, the proximal thoracic curve was not fused, and 2 patients had a significant shoulder imbalance which required a revision surgery. So the take-home points from this paper that were to emerge was that some double curve patterns or S-shaped curves could be treated with a selective thoracic fusion, and this actually lies at the heart of John Moore's legacy. Now this term selective thoracic fusion is used very loosely. It does not apply to C-shaped curves. Moe never meant it for C pattern curves. It only applies to S-shaped curves where both curves completely cross the midline. And basically the key is to identify the lumbar curve as a compensatory curve so that it can be spared of the fusion. However, this concept caused a great deal of controversy over the years after this classification was published. The other important revelation of this classification was that for a single thoracic curve pattern, there were two variants: the long thoracic type, in which the L4 was tilted to the right, and the double thoracic, where the left shoulder was higher. And this classification remained the gold standard for 20 odd years. So with the LIV recommendation for type 1 non-selective thoracic fusion, the LIV should be the stable vertebra but never below L4. For type 2, it should be selective thoracic fusion where the LIV is stable vertebra. If there is a difference between the stable vertebra and the neutral vertebra, then choose the stable vertebra. For type 3, fuse the thoracic, the LIV is a stable vertebra. For type 4, it's a long thoracic, LIV is a stable vertebra, but typically a lower selected level compared to the type 3 because of the long nature of this curve. And for type 5, fuse both proximal thoracic and main thoracic curve, and the LIV should be the stable vertebra. So the criticisms primarily were that this classification was had a poor reliability, mainly because of the definitions of S-shaped curves. Whether it is a king 2 or a king 3, does the lumbar curve cross the midline or not? That was a kind of a confusion. Some people called these borderline cases what we call the B modifier curves nowadays with the Lenke classification as King's type 2. Some called them as King's type 3. So that was the big confusion here, and that's where the reliability of this classification suffered. The classification also ignored the sagittal plane that we know now. It is non-comprehensive because it didn't include the lumbar spine or thoracolumbar curves. And again, all these recommendations were based on the Harrington instrumentation where the LIV is the stable vertebra. But now with better instrumentation, we are able to cheat short of the stable vertebra. We don't have to end at a vertebra that is very clearly bisected by the stable vertebra. We can maybe stop at a vertebra that is touched by the central sacral vertical line that Lenke has called the last touched vertebra. But that's because of our ability to better three-dimensionally correct the structural curves. And that's why the LIV recommendations have changed, but the principles proposed by Moe still remain true. So then came along this paper about 20 years later in 2001 by the Lenke and the Harm study group. And the purpose of this paper was to improve upon the King's classification. And the reliability testing in this paper, they used 27 patients with 4 radiographs each, AP, lateral and bending x-rays. There were two groups of surgeons. The one group was 5 surgeons who had developed the classification, and then there were another group in which had 7 random surgeons from the SRS. They used the SRS definitions of different curve regions, and accordingly they were the proximal thoracic curves, main thoracic curves, thoracolumbar or lumbar curves. The structurality of these curves were the major curves and the minor curves. The largest curve was always a structural curve called the major curve, and the smaller curves were the minor curves. The minor curve could be a structural curve or a non-structural curve, and they defined the structurality of minor curves depending on uh, it how flexible it was on side bending, and whether there was junctional kyphosis in the proximal thoracic region or thoracolumbar region on the standing lateral x-ray. So if the bending x-ray showed the residual curve to be larger than 25 degrees, then that curve was called structural curve. So now you may wonder, where do these numbers come from? And these numbers were an arbitrary number cut off arrived by consensus by this Harm study group. because they were measurable as a reliable cutoff, they were not backed by any evidence. And this is one of the main criticisms of the Lenki classification's definition of structurality. And it is also one of the main reasons why we break the rules of these classifications and don't follow the recommendations for the different areas to fuse. And the higher number of non-selective fusions that are recommended by these classifications arise mainly if we follow this structurality rule very strictly. So that's important to remember that. So accordingly, there were 6 curve types proposed by this classification, and each curve type had modifiers. The first modifier was a lumbar modifier, depending on where the apex of the lumbar curve is with respect to the central sacral line. And the central sacral line in this was defined as a vertical line bisecting the cephalad aspect of the sacrum, which is perpendicular to the true horizontal or parallel to the edge of the radiograph. So here it accounted for these minor pelvic obliquities because of a limb length discrepancies that were less than 2 centimeters. Those were ignored. Only if the limb length discrepancy of more than 2 centimeter is there, or if it contributes to the spinal deformity, then you would take an x-ray with a wedge underneath the foot to square the pelvis and then draw the central sacral vertical line. But minor degrees of pelvic obliquity are ignored, and that's why you need to draw the central sacral vertical line parallel to the edge of the radiograph and not according to how the King classification defined it. The stable vertebra was defined as in the same way, the most cephalad vertebra, that is most closely bisected. But if the disc was the one that is most closely bisected, then the vertebra that is caudal to that disc was selected as the stable vertebra. Then you have these 3 modifiers, but you essentially see what does that B modifier is doing. The B modifier curves are essentially not uh, contributing to any recommendations, because B modifier curve is just a slightly larger lumbar curve that is never going to be fused anyway. So the A and B type of lumbar curves are never part of the fusion, whereas the C modifier curves is where you have to make a decision whether you are going to be selective or non-selective. So the main reason for adding the B modifier curve was essentially to differentiate the King 2 from the King 3, those curves that were hanging in between, which were not completely off the midline but were still S-shaped curves, where some people were classifying them as King 2, other people were classifying as King 3. So for me, I think the B modifier curve essentially just makes the Lenki classification a little bit more reliable. It is not essentially changing a big deal about how the curves are fused, because a B modifier curve is never going to be fused anyway. Coming to the sagittal modifier, the thoracic modifier was a sagittal curve drawn from T5 to T12. Now the main criticism of this is that when we draw cob angle, even in the sagittal plane, we go from the most tilted vertebra to the most tilted vertebra. Here um, we are not using that. The classification is using fixed levels to define the sagittal corbs, and as we all know, the sagittal profiles of different people is different. You may have an end vertebra in the sagittal profile not as T5, or may not, the end vertebra may not be T12, the lower end vertebra, for a sagittal kyphosis or a hypokyphosis. So that's where the true measurements, these are not true sagittal corbs, but just to improve the reliability of the classification, a fixed level was used. Um, the Lenki group also tried to incorporate a third dimension to their classification, which was the axial rotation modifier, but they failed to do this because the radiographic measurements for rotations were just too unreliable, and there was a lot of inter-observer variability. So to keep the classification reliable, they scrapped the rotational component, and hence the Lenki classification remains a 2D classification. And these were the rules or the recommendations proposed by the Lenki classification. The largest curve, the major curve, always is included in the fusion. fuse the minor structural curves, and the structure is part is in quotes because that is defined by a very arbitrary rule of 25 degrees, and leave the non-structural rule curves unfused. And and uh, and because of this arbitrary 25-degree structurality rule for minor curves, there were some rule breakers. So a rule breaker is if you don't fuse a structural minor curve, or if you fuse a non-structural minor curve. In these patients, you are not following the recommendations laid down by the classifications, and this is a rule breaker. And many of these rule breakers, as I have said before, is because of this arbitrary 25-degree rule. So the Lenki classification tells you about the regions which need to be fused for different curve types, and the reliability among the 5 surgeons who originated this classification. The inter observer reliability was good. The same 24 patients' X-rays were classified according to the King's classification. Accordingly, the reliability was poor. For intra-observer reliability, for the Lenki classification was good, but intra-observer reliability using the same set of X-rays for the King's classification was fair. For the group 2 with the 7 SRS members, the inter-observer and the intra-observer reliability was fairly good for the Lenki classification for the curve type, lumbar modifier, and the sagittal modifier. So the Lenki classification is a good way of communicating the curve type. So when Lenki's operated patients, 315 patients were looked at from the classification point of view. You can see that the most common pattern again is the main thoracic curve pattern, and the triple major curve is the least common. Type 6 is also least common in this consecutive series of 315 patients. But take a look at this line here, which tells us how many patients were fused according to the Lenki's recommendations, and you can see that this number is smaller than the total number of patients in each group. So there were about 31 patients who were not treated according to the Lenki's recommendations. So 284 patients were fused according to the classification. So 10% patients were the rule breakers. So if you see this paper, which was published a year later from the harm study group, it included patients from all these different members of this harm study group, had 606 patients, out of which 546 patients were fused according to the rules laid down by the Lenki classification. It means that about 60 patients, these rules were not followed. So out of the 65 Lenki 1C patients, where the rules say where the classification says to do a selective thoracic fusion, 25 patients had a non-selective fusion. Out of the 69 patients with Lenki 3C, where the rule says to do a non-selective fusion, 7 patients had a selective thoracic fusion. So another study published 10 years later by the same harm study group, they tried to see if the Lenki classification changes scoliosis treatment according to the recommendations laid down by them. Out of the 1,310 patients, 191 patients were rule breakers, about 15%. And if you see this table in this, you can see before 2001, before the classification was published, the number of rule breakers in different groups was this much percentage. You can see most of the rule breakers are happening in the C modifier curves or the double curves like Lenki's 3, 4 or 6. But after the publication of the classification, the percentage of rule breakers you can see for the C-shaped curves, actually the rule breakers are decreasing somewhat from 13% to 6%. So 1, 2 and 5 are the C pattern curves, but you see for the most of the S pattern curves, which are the 3C, 4C and 5C, you can see after the Lenki classification has been published, the percentage of rule breakers has not really gone down. In fact, some of them slightly the percentage seems to be more than before the classification was published. So here what is happening here is that although people are using the Lenki classification, they are still using the principles laid down by Mo in determining which patient should get a selective and which patient should get a non-selective fusion especially for the double curve or the S-shaped curve patterns. So the positive points of this classification is that it is more comprehensive, includes thoracolumbar and lumbar curves. Total 42 curve patterns are included, which you may say is a little mind-boggling, and many surgeons still have not converted themselves to the Lenki classification, especially the people who grew up on King's classification. And it forced one to look at the sagittal plane, making this a good 2D classification. It had a good, excellent reliability, making a good teaching tool, a communication tool, and a research tool. However, the classifications has problems because it does not make specific recommendations for the UIV and the LIV. It does not take into account the clinical appearance of the patient, the rotational prominence of the lumbar spine or the thoracic spine, nor the skeletal maturity. Neither did the King's classification, but these factors are important when we choose different areas of the curves to be fused. As we have discussed, the structurality rule is arbitrary, which led to a lot of rule breakers. Rotation is not included and it remains a 3D classification. Um, there are new classifications that are coming up that are 3D, but still most reliable classification for us to communicate with each other remains the Lenki classification. And finally, this classification does not include the King's 4, which accounted for about 9% of the 405 patients in the King's series. Later on, Peter Newton's group corrected this problem and included an R modifier or the AR modifier, which subdivides Lenki 1 curves into Lenki 1A R, which essentially means that the L4 is tilted to the right side, which is the same as the King's 4. So it's basically a rehash of the old classification. So whether you call it a Lenki 1A R or a King 4, it still means the same thing. So to summarize, I think we all need to understand both these classifications, primarily the King and Moore classification, to understand the principles behind how we treat AIS patients. And the Lenki classification essentially is a language in which we speak and communicate with each other. But the principle laid down by Moore in terms of the selective thoracic fusion and how these different curve patterns should be treated still stands true, even though the classification has changed, even though the instrumentation has changed. So the principles, I think, still remains the same. Thank you very much for watching.